Prep for 2023 begins right now. What are the serious obstacles the Chiefs have to prepare for in getting ready for their 2023 opponents? We're digging deep today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Happy Monday. We are brought to you today by FanDuel, the sports book, the official one of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. We have a lot to go over. I'm excited about this as we start to really turn the page post-draft, but towards the season. We're going over what are the obstacles, what are the must-haves, something very similar that we have to get into week by week, quarter by quarter today. Thanks for making us your first listen. This is going to be fun. Check out the next listen that you want in maybe one of our opponents in the division, maybe one of the AFC Contenders. We're going to talk about several of them today, so we wish that you would check out the other shows as well as getting liked, subbed, and hit that bell here for our channel. We are part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform, starting on YouTube and echoing through the Twitter sphere, et cetera, as we go around. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, as well as NFL33.com and RGR Football.
And I'm Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. There is a lot to talk about when we start looking at this schedule. We do need to get into that. I just want to mention really quick, just so we don't let it slip by, Shamari Connor, the safety, did get signed over the weekend. First Chiefs pick to get signed to a contract. So just want to throw that out there and relay that news. Lots to talk about when we start talking about the schedule, though. And we're going to have a lot going on this week, talking about Shamari Connor actually specifically on tomorrow's show. And then a little bit more about some of the running backs on Thursday, and looking into Friday, we're going to be looking at, what are our predictions for this season. So a lot to come this week, and obviously we'll have Matt on Wednesday as well. So thank you all of our everydayers, and it's going to be a fun slate this week.
It is, and we're going to have projections. We're opening up the playbook, our playbook. More projections this season as we look at this time frame pre-OTAs. We'll look post-OTAs. We'll look in camp, and we'll look just before the season to give you a rundown of everywhere we see evolution on this roster. It's going to be great. And evolving is what I think the first hurdle is in the first quarter of this season. We gave you the rundown on the schedule show live last week, but want to get a little bit deeper into what are the things that the Chiefs either have circled on their calendar, or we certainly should. When you look at the first quarter of the season, it's Lions to open it up. It's Jags, Bears, and Jets. There's some connections on several of them. But for me, what stands out the most is number 4 against the Jets, because they put a good defense together. They've added some weapons, and now they obviously have the one thing that they've been missing the last few years in Aaron Rodgers. The question is, which version of Aaron are you going to get? But I love the matchup.
That's a huge question.
Elite QB against elite QB. I mean, we should remember Aaron Rodgers was an MVP just a season ago. So let's not undersell the whole thing, because it's a really unique storyline. But how encouraged or discouraged are you? It's a Sunday night game. It's another prime timer that the Chiefs get to go up against Aaron Rodgers. I think it's great, and I'm really interested to see what they do with the Jets.
It'd be the first time Mahomes and Rodgers have played against each other. They have been scheduled to play against each other a couple of times. Mahomes has been hurt. Rodgers has been out. A little bit of everything running into whether or not they've actually played against each other. And then, for me, I understand what you're saying, elite QB versus elite QB. But the question to me is Rodgers still an elite QB? And I say that just because you saw what he did last season, and elite QBs usually elevate the talent around him. And he did that to an extent, but he didn't do it to the extent that you would expect. So, I'm questioning just whether or not he's going to be an elite QB with the Jets this season. We'll see. Everything is really in his favor. He's got a lot of players. He basically got the wide receivers he wanted. It seems like he's got Hackett back on his side. So it seems like he should have a great situation with the Jets. Now we're going to find out, was it Green Bay, or was it Aaron Rodgers that was really the problem?
That's going to be really telling. And I think that this is an early look at what a lot of people are saying. The Jets may be able to contend for the AFC East division title against the Bills. Obviously, they have Miami. We'll talk about them coming up here in the next segment. But it's all about which version of Aaron do you get? I'm with you. There's a cliff involved either way. Is he standing on the precipice of it, or is it all already fallen over the edge and we're just watching him go all the way down to the bottom? That's going to be the outcome. But do you see that as the prime matchup for the first quarter as well, or is there another game that you like?
I don't see it as the prime matchup. I think it's a great matchup. I see the prime matchup as being Jacksonville. And the reason I see that is because of Jacksonville's team that they're going to have surrounding Trevor Lawrence this year. As long as all three of those wide receivers are going to be healthy, that is going to be a hell of a game between the Chiefs and the Jaguars. I think that's going to be the marquee game of the first quarter for Kansas City. And I don't sleep on Detroit either. I'm not going to say Detroit is going to come in and beat Kansas City, but I think that's going to be a crazy game as well. I think Detroit is going to be much improved over a season ago, and we're going to see what they have. And I will say I'm also curious about the Bears game, and it's not necessarily that I think the Bears and the Chiefs will be a great game. It's get an idea as to what the Bears can actually be, because they now have started to put the pieces together around Justin Fields. That could be an intriguing game as well.
I certainly hope that it's intriguing. I don't know if I see the Jags coming along as much as it feels like. I mean, yes, they're getting Calvin Ridley back. Where is Calvin Ridley in his career? It's Zay Jones, it's Christian Kirk. Yes, that's a threesome you should worry about. They just drafted Parker Washington. I do like him. I don't know about the fit there and who's going to win out. But in the end, you still got to run that offense. And I know that Etienne had a nice season last year. My question is, can he be that force? Because I do think the Chiefs and their young secondary are going to be able to devise a concept that keeps things in front of them. And so I don't know that Trevor Lawrence is going to be able to, through the air, be able to really hurt them enough to keep up putting points up with the Chiefs. So for me, it comes back to what's the Chiefs been giving up in recent years, and that's on the ground. And can Etienne hit the ground running after what was a high volume season last year? They brought in Tanks Bigsby in the draft to, like, I think, help supplant him, give him some support. The question for me is that what Doug's going to do, or is Doug going to come up with something different? Is he going to run my favorite fullback at us now that they drafted him in Derek Parrish?
Well, and the big question to me when it comes to Jacksonville is, and really it's not even Jacksonville, it's just about the Chiefs in the first quarter of the season. Kansas City's defense has started slow every single year. That is going to play a part in how they play in those 4 games. And if they're not ready and going and firing on all cylinders week 2, that could be a big problem. It could be a shootout on both, coming from both offenses. And I'm not saying the Jaguars are going to have the best offense in the NFL, but I do think that they could have a very good offense. And if Kansas City's defense isn't ready, like they have shown in the past several years not to be ready early in the season, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I can agree. It gets a little funky after that. We're going to have to see how those matchups are, see where they get out of it. But all the high-end stuff that we need to talk about is coming right after this, because I got to tell you guys, the fast break is on, and you want to get in on the action right now for the NBA playoffs and everything going on at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get their no-sweat first bet, and that's up to $1,000 in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't pay off and doesn't win, that's $1,000 in bonus bets is your possibility of putting into your account for just making a bet that doesn't quite get it done. There's no better place to get in the playoffs right now than America's #1 sports book. It's FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's right over here if you're watching on YouTube. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon for a no-sweat first bet and up to $1,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel, America's sports betting partner of the NBA, the MLB, and most importantly, the NFL. Moving to the second phase is where I start to get a little bit comfortable. The Vikings, Broncos, Chargers, Broncos little run there. 2 home, 2 away. You're going to have a Thursday night, and you're going to have 3 afternoon games. We talked about it live the other night that there's only 2 noon starts in this franchise's future right now, at least as it is now, until we get to the flex scheduling and all that. But we have to take what we have now. So it's going to be like the one section of the season that I feel is going to feel a little bit more normal, quote unquote. I know the afternoon games aren't the normal kickoff, but at least it's steady. And so I think that almost lulls you to sleep a little bit, in that we're going to hear a lot of hype about Russ Wilson and the Broncos. The Chiefs are going to play them twice in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks. I'm sorry, back and then forth. I don't think that's going to be the story of it. The thing that I'm looking for here is, after adding another weapon on the offensive side of the ball for Herbert, it's the Chargers matchup on October 22nd that I'm most concerned with in the second quarter of the Chiefs season, just to make sure that who I think is going to be the most complete contender to push the Chiefs for the AFC West title, that is the Chargers. I think it's critical to get that first win right out the bat. Do you?
I do. I think that this is the most important game of this quarter. And I really want to say really quick, They do play the Denver Broncos on Thursday Night Football on October 12th. Then they come back 17 days later and they play the Denver Broncos in a afternoon game on the 29th. So they have a 17-day break between the two. And in between that, they have the Chargers. Now, part of the reason I point that out is because it's a Thursday night game against the Broncos, and then they have 3 extra days to prepare for said Chargers, and they're playing them at home. I think that's a really good thing for Kansas City. It's a mini bye, and I think I think this team is going to be ready to go. And this is by far the biggest game, at least as where we stand right now. Until we see something different from Denver, this is the most important game when it comes to this division and Kansas City playing one of the teams in the division.
Yeah. And folks, next week or two, we're going to take a look at OTAs for the rest of the AFC West division foes and get a little bit deeper into their rosters. But just as a high level, the Broncos have added some weapons on offense. Obviously, the biggest change is Sean Payton taking over the head coaching responsibilities and honestly a lot of the roster work with George Payton out there in Denver. And what they can do for Russ. Can they put Russ to be able to compete with Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes in terms of putting up points? That's going to be the big question. It comes back to me is you've doubled down in adding another big, explosive, for the most part, at least in a straight line wide receiver in Quentin Johnson to go with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Everyone understands how I rate Keenan Allen and what I think of him in this particular offense. But that's three-headed monster. If it's week 7 and Keenan Allen's still on the field, A, I'll be surprised. B, I think that's going to be like the first serious test, despite the Broncos the week before and the Jets earlier, for the young corner group, the DBs overall. And we'll have more in depth about the defensive backfield tomorrow. Don't miss that one. But this is where I think the rubber hits the road in a team that's able, with the quarterback and the targets, to really try to push the edges of what the Chiefs defense can do.
I absolutely agree, and I do think that this is, like I said, the biggest game of the quarter. I just want to say really quick, when it comes to Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, it's a question of whether or not Sean Payton can get Russell Wilson back to what he was in Seattle with the limited mobility that Russell has now, because he doesn't have the same athleticism that he had 3 or 4 years ago, and that is what changed his game over the past several years. And I don't think he's going to get that back. So if that's the case, can you get him to be as efficient and do the things that he needs to be able to do in the offense without the athleticism that made him great to begin with, because it allowed him to get outside the pocket and make plays downfield. When you look at the Chargers, I'm really intrigued to see how Quentin Johnston fits into this offense. And I don't mean that he's not going to have a place. I know he's going to have a place. Obviously, he's your first-round draft pick. You're going to get him on the field. Mm-hmm. But you're in a situation where you're going to have a guy that is not a great route runner in Quentin Johnston that is going to basically have to step in for Keenan Allen when Keenan Allen goes down hurt. You're replacing him with a guy that's more like Mike Williams. And is that going to be enough for this offense to be able to move the ball and move the ball well? We'll see. If all 3 of the wide receivers can stay healthy, that's a big boon for them. But Quentin Johnston is far from a polished product. And quite frankly, I don't think he is a guy that is going to be having a huge effect in his rookie season. He may have a couple of good games, but I don't think he's going to have a huge effect the entire year.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it becomes, what can you do with those 2 guys that are more similar than they are different? But Mike Williams has been very effective against the Chiefs over the years. So, like, there is that aspect of, if you double down on what you do well, what can it do for you in the end? I feel like the Chiefs are a little bit more competitive all the way around in the defensive backfield. But that is clearly the second quarter highlight for me. And then we talked ad nauseum quite a lot the other night about that third quarter stretch. The Germany game in week 9 against the Dolphins, then the bye, then Monday Night Football against the Eagles in the Super Bowl rematch, Raiders, and then Green Bay, which Jordan Love should be still helming, I would think, because I don't think they have much beyond him. But the one game we didn't talk about on the Thursday live reaction show is the Raiders. This is going to be the Chiefs' first look at the Raiders at that point in week 12. And a lot of folks feel that the stabilization factor of Jimmy Garoppolo is really going to help them. Obviously, Max Crosby is probably the premier pass rusher in this division right now. So those 2 things, maybe we didn't give it enough emphasis to it the other night, but how do you feel about the Raiders matchup right now with the Chiefs? Obviously, a long way out from there, 3 quarters through the season.
I feel better about it than I feel about any of the other games against the Chargers, quite honestly, because I look at the Raiders and I still don't believe in Jimmy Garoppolo. And quite honestly, the other part of it is I don't believe in their coach. Until McDaniels can actually show that he can coach a team and he can be successful, I'm not going to worry about that franchise near as much. I'm not saying that they can't trip up Kansas City and win a game or two over the next couple of years with McDaniels there, but it's not going to be a situation where I think they're going to be the top of the division or anywhere close to the top of the division, because McDaniels hasn't shown the ability to be successful as an NFL head coach yet. And until he does that, I don't think it's going to matter as much. And Jimmy Garoppolo is Jimmy Garoppolo. He's not a great quarterback. I don't think he's as good as Derek Carr is.
Okay.
I think it's a step down at QB, quite honestly. And you get rid of Darren Waller because of a situation that the coach made that was stupid. You get rid of one of your best players, and it's a bad situation for Las Vegas. And I know they're a rival, and I don't like the Raiders and ever have, but you would always like to see a tough game and something that was going to be a good game every time. And I just don't know that you're going to see that.
Maybe not. We'll certainly get the best option to look at there. That is going to be an afternoon kick, obviously, amongst some primetime or at least nationally televised games in the rest of that quarter. So how do they wrap up? The 5 games of the season are going to be important. We're going to get to them right after this. So we hit the home stretch, and it's really stacked, to tell you the truth. We expect that the Buffalo Bills will be a playoff contender at that point. We talked earlier about the Jets possibly pushing them for the AFC East. The sleeper in that division is the Monday night game the Chiefs have against the Patriots, who I think have done a sneakily good job of shoring up some of their iffy positions that Bills just known to get high performance out of what looks like a smaller investment. So I'm really intrigued to see how they do. I would expect at that time that Bailey Zappi's the starter for them, because that's just the way that my life goes. And I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for him. I think that helps the Chiefs as well. Then they get back with the Raiders that we just talked about on the Christmas Day game, and they finish it up there with the Bengals. Late season matchup, another possible playoff preview there. I do expect the Bengals to be in striking position. Maybe even the Chiefs are maybe lagging behind them a game or two in terms of standings. We're going to be having a lot of discussion about playoff standings at that point. And then they left it without a determination, is that final matchup against those same Chargers. So the themes seem to be running in circles here, but for me, it's still the Bengals that stand out to me in this last group of 5 games that they have to overcome, and they have to come out and shut down what the talk is that, oh, you got lucky the last time you beat us, but Burrow still really got your number. I think that's BS, but they got to prove it.
Well, before I get into the Bengals, I want to say really quick, they play 3 of the last 5 games at home. I think that's going to help Kansas City close out the season. I do think that that's a positive for them. Obviously, Arrowhead is a huge boon for this team, and the crowd is fantastic. So thank you all for that. The one thing I will say is I agree with you for the most part. The one caveat I would throw in there is the Bills. And the reason I say that is because the Bills are in a division now where they're going to have tough competition with the Jets and the Dolphins. If the Bills are still winning that division when they play Kansas City, that could be a huge game. If they're not, then it's obviously the Bengals. But the Bengals have a much easier chance than than the Bills will of winning their division because of the talent level in their division compared to what the Bills are going to be facing. So to me, it comes down to what happens in that AFC East. How does that division shake out? And I will say, I would appreciate it if Bailey Zappi is the starting quarterback. I have a couple of his rookie cards, so I would really appreciate that. It's maybe that gives you guys a clue as to what my new business is going to be.
Yeah, right. Pay attention or watch this space is what we ought to be saying, right? Announcements coming. When you look at the Bills, the offensive weapon they added was Dalton Kincaid. I love that matchup. I have been a big Knox guy when he came out. He's obviously had a thing to make some clutch plays, but now Dalton Kincaid gives them a 1-2 punch. It's really the only guy that I can project to even be a starter for the Bills in terms of their new draft class. So maybe you're on the right track there. It's certainly going to be a cutthroat division in the East. But I will say this, the Bengals are going to have a couple of up-and-comers. I do think that the Browns will be better. I don't know if they're going to push too deep into playoff territory, but it's the Ravens. All the drama with Lamar coming back, they did get him back. They've added weapons for him. Odell Beckham is going to be there. We talked ad nauseum about him last year, about joining the Chiefs. Now he's going to be playing with Lamar. They added Zay Flowers, another quick release, change of direction guy. And then Bateman, if he stays healthy, should be there. Now you're looking at guys that played a lot of snaps like Aguilar, who
But
aren't going to be starters.
You just said the key there. If he stays healthy, and it's not even about Zay Flowers. It's about Lamar Jackson. Can Lamar Jackson stay healthy? If he can't stay healthy, it's not going to matter. And I'm not saying he can't. I hope he can. I think he's a fantastic player, and it's better for the NFL if he can stay healthy because it's going to be a more fun season. But if he is not staying healthy, I don't think the Steelers have a chance at upsetting the Bengals in this division. I think that the Steelers could be a lot better. I like Kenny Pickett. I think he can be a good quarterback, but I still think they're at least a year away from getting to a point where they can challenge in that division.
Okay.
At least that's where I sit on the Steelers right now. And then when it comes to the Ravens, you're right. They've had a lot of talent, but the question when it comes to their talent is, can you play up to that talent level and can your QB stay healthy? With the way Lamar Jackson plays, he gets himself in a situation where he's going to get hurt more often than other QBs because of the way he plays the game. And it works for him, but is it sustainable long term? That's one of the reasons that the Ravens didn't want to give him anywhere close to a guaranteed contract, is because of how injured he has been the past couple of seasons. So if he could stay healthy, yeah, maybe the Bengals have some competition, but if he doesn't stay healthy, it's probably going to be just the Bengals in that division running away with it, I would imagine.
Yeah, it may be. They added some talent here in the draft, a change of pace back for Joe Mixon and Chase Brown that I think they'll use against the Chiefs well. And they added Charlie Jones, a really intriguing underneath, like super change direction wide receiver that's going to challenge anybody playing nickel. Could be Shamari Connor. We're going to talk about him tomorrow, but what's your take on that?
Well, and I do think the Bengals are going to be better this year than they were last year. I think that the offensive line is going to be the big question mark, as it has been for them to this point. And I really want to say really quick before we just skip past this, the Browns are going to be better as well. I think Deshaun Watson coming back from, dealing with what he dealt with last year and actually being able to play and get ready for the entire season and just have that whole season, I think he's going to be better. But the other key is their defense is going to be better. They just added Darius Smith over the weekend. They traded for him, so their defense is going to be even better. They added Juan Thornhill in the offseason. So the Browns are going to be better. I just, again, until we see something where they actually show up and can win, push to win 10 or 11 games, I'm not sold on the Browns really challenging the Bengals. So I do think that the Bengals game is probably the marquee matchup. But the other part of this, and something that we, I think we discussed a little bit when the schedule release came out, it's possible that Chargers game is going to be huge for Kansas City.
Yeah.
It could mean making the playoffs. It could mean not making the playoffs. It could mean being the number 1 seed. It could mean being the number 4 or 5 seed. We don't know.
It could be a huge one, and I think that's why they left it to be determined in terms of flexing and what the schedule will be, is because they do see that. What the schedule tells you is what the NFL feels about the matchups and the rosters, right? And I do think that gives away a lot.
And I'm glad that they put it with the Chargers. And I know a lot of teams, I know a lot of people wouldn't like that, but to me, you put the 2 best teams in the division up against each other on the last day of the season, and easily it should be the Chargers, it should be the Chiefs, and I'm sure we're going to start hearing in the next couple of weeks the Chargers are going to win the AFC West for the 8th time in a row.
Of course,
and just expect that's coming soon. But it's going to be interesting. And, the other biggest storyline that we have to figure out over the next couple of weeks is, what is Justin Herbert and what is Joe Burrow going to do? What are their contracts going to look like? How is it going to shape the entire AFC over the next couple of seasons? Because it's going to have a huge effect. If they sign 5-year deals versus signing, 6, 7, 8, 9-year deals, that's going to have a huge effect on what those teams can do, because both of those teams don't have the money Kansas City has, and Kansas City is one of the smaller markets in the NFL. They are family-owned teams that just don't have the money to spend like other teams in the NFL.
It's going to be interesting to see how that stacks up, because then we have the Mahomes restructure or recontract coming. That'll all be determined through that. But one more note on Cleveland. You're going to pull for Cleveland this season to give the Bengals all they can. You're going to pull for the Ravens to give them all they can. Really cool note. 22 in Cleveland was already occupied by Grant Delpit. So Juan Thornhill went and took number 1. And I love that move. So when you're watching the Browns, old Juan's going to be out there wearing number 1. So good for him.
I'm really curious to see if anybody picks 0 in Kansas City, if there's anybody on the roster that picks 0. And that's an option this year. There are a couple of big players that have already said they're moving to number 0, which, interestingly enough. But Be interested to see if Kansas City has any of those players. And I will say this, I'll be rooting for the Steelers because I like Kenny Pickett as a quarterback, and I really like George Pickens. I thought he was going to be a good wide receiver. He showed it last year, and I think he's going to grow even in year two. And he could challenge that defense on the Bengals and the Browns and anybody in that division. I think that Pickens is going to be a problem. The question is Kenny Pickett the answer? So we'll find out this year how they're going to stack up as well.
Absolutely. Everybody pulled for every other NFC North opponent for the Bengals.
AFC North, but yes.
And yeah, those guys too. That's it for us today. Tomorrow, we're going to get into what the defensive secondary can look like. What are the changes? A lot of turmoil about who's going to play nickel, who's going to play safety, who's going to do a bit of both. We'll get to that tomorrow. Running back breakdown. What is this timeshare going to look like in this season later in the week? And then our first round at projecting the Chiefs wins and losses, their total record. Don't miss Friday's show. We are here 5 days a week. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell. Make sure you're one of us. We appreciate your time and listening today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.